Gentlemen and female gentlemen, we are here for another lore dive here on the Taku channel. Here on the Taku channel, we do lore every single day. Kurt Cobain allegedly offed himself, ended his own life, and quite literally, we're gonna have to talk about this because it seems like that was a giant cover-up. All right, I really don't know a lot about this situation in general, so this is kind of a blind react lore dive situation from a Tozy. Thanks so much for being here, and do what you want in the next one because I do the most requested video every day here on the Taku channel. So let's see what we got.
30 years ago, Kurt Cobain's passing was ruled to be self-inflicted, but now forensic experts are saying, hey, this might have all
oh boy, oh my, it was
been staged.
More than 3 decades after his death shocked the music world, questions are once again swirling around the final hours of Kurt Cobain.
I love this. It's gonna be terrifying. I'm I'm sitting here hoping that it's not like Kurt Cobain exposed a pedophile ring, and then he killed himself. It's like, all right, dude. Everyone that exposes pedophiles kill themselves, huh?
Nirvana's lead singer was found dead April 5th, 1994, inside of a greenhouse above a Seattle garage. And Seattle police, they closed the case after the King County medical examiner ruled it suicide, citing a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Shotgun wound, to be even more specific. So why am I talking about it now? Well, an unofficial private team of forensic scientists says the evidence tells a very different story.
And I mean, this case has been closed for longer than I've been alive. But in April of 1994, Kurt Cobain was found unresponsive in his Seattle home. A firearm injury was discovered, and authorities ruled it a self-inflicted one. A note was then found nearby, and toxicology reports showed high levels of substances in his system. And again, the King County medical examiner determined the manner of death was self-inflicted, and the Seattle Police Department agreed. Case closed, seemingly, and that was the end of it, or so we—
And then they realized Kurt Cobain insulted Hillary Clinton the day before. Oh, no!
Thought, at least. And look, I am no conspiracy channel, but recently there have been official news reports.
Guys, if you're not a conspiracy channel at this point, you're just in the wrong profession, all right? The conspiracy theories, they're real. The government hates you. They lie to you. They manipulate you. They have a plan. You are not part of their plan, all right? Don't fall for this shit.
About a new independent forensic review of this case. And some of the claims made are strange enough where I felt like I should probably cover this. So today we're going to be going through what's being claimed and what the authorities are saying in response. Typically, I start by explaining, who the person we're talking about today is, but most people know who Kurt Cobain was. Lead singer of Nirvana and an absolute musical genius. But back in 1994, Cobain had been struggling.
That's basically everything I know about this situation, by the way. The fact that he was a singer.
And we know he had chronic pain and depression. Just weeks earlier, there had been a serious medical incident overseas, and police previously removed firearms from his home after concerns of his own safety. And the medical incident we're talking about involved Cobain taking an OD level amount of substances before being found by his wife, Courtney. Then a few weeks later, Courtney called the police to say that Cobain was locking himself in his room with a firearm. But when police arrived, he said he was actually trying to avoid his wife. And again, both of these scenes happened just the month before he passed. And I'm mentioning them because they've been used as proof that Cobain was leading up to his passing. But they've also been used as proof that not everything was good in his home life. So on April 8th, an electrician installing security lighting discovered him in a room above the garage at his Lake Washington Boulevard home. At first, he thought that Cobain was asleep. Then he realized something was seriously wrong. Authorities later determined he likely passed away around April 5th. And a handwritten note addressed to his childhood imaginary friend was discovered nearby. And officially, the case was classified as a self-inflicted passing. But back then, not everyone accepted that. And that was partly due to the mess that happened in the week leading up to his passing. Because for 6 days in April 1994, Kurt Cobain was missing. One of the biggest rock stars in the world was essentially completely off the radar.
Happen?
Police were looking for him, his wife was looking for him, and she even hired a private investigator. But on April 1st, he called Love from Los Angeles, and she later told Seattle newspaper, he said, "Courtney, no matter what happens, I want you to know you made a really good record." And according to Courtney, that was the last time they ever spoke. He then flew back to Seattle, and on a flight, he happened to sit right next to the Guns N' Roses bassist Duff McKagan.
That sounds like a funny coincidence.
McKagan then later said that he felt something was off. And quote, "All of my instincts told me something was wrong." After learning he left his treatment, Love canceled his credit cards and hired a private investigator, Tom Grant, to track him down. Meanwhile, Cobain was reportedly seen around Seattle on April 2nd and April 3rd. On April 4th, his mother filed a missing persons report, telling police that she feared he might harm himself. And according to the police timeline, on April 5th, he returned to his home and went into the greenhouse above his garage. He then wrote a note. He left his wallet open, possibly for identification, and then sometime around that day, he passed away. He wouldn't be discovered for 3 more days, though. And almost immediately, questions started popping up. A local journalist then started doing public access segments, suggesting the case didn't make sense, with one of the main points being there just wasn't enough blood on the scene. A private
That's a pretty big deal. Hello? Anyone that watched Dexter knows that you don't die with no blood. All right, dude. All right. I love how they don't even care. It's like you'll have like an obvious inconsistency, like the fact that there's not really a lot of blood for a guy that shot himself in the head with a shotgun, right? Like, not a lot of blood. Anyway, it was probably a suicide. Like, are we serious, bro?
An investigator later said that he believed there were inconsistencies in the timeline and in the evidence. Documentaries were then made and books were then written, but by the late 90s, the story had turned into a full-blown cultural debate. Then you had a documentary created called Kurt and Courtney, which then explored the theory. Then in 2014, on the 20th anniversary...
Someone in my chat said there were no fingerprints on the gun. Is that true? Because if that's true, then he obviously didn't kill himself.
Seattle police reviewed the case again. They developed rolls of film that hadn't been processed back in 1994. They re-examined the scene photos, and once again, they reaffirmed the original conclusion. Officially, nothing changed. But here's the thing, the conspiracy never really went away. And now, in 2026, it's back. Because a new independent forensic team says they've looked at the same materials and reached a very different conclusion. And this is where it starts getting weird again. So here's what's different this time. In early 2026, multiple news outlets reported that an independent research team had taken another look at the case. And I know, I'm talking about a private forensic group, but these are peer-reviewed, published findings, meaning a whole bunch of smart people who specialize in this kind of thing looked at it and gave it 2 thumbs up. So it seems short-sighted to just dismiss this. They reviewed crime scene photos, autopsy findings, and toxicology records. And after doing that, they claim the evidence fits a staged scene. Not a self-inflicted one, a staged one. That's a massive claim. To put it...
Huh? That's the most massive claim you could possibly have.
Lightly, Michelle Wilkins, one of the researchers, said that the forensic specialist Brian Burnett reviewed the materials for several days and concluded the death was more consistent with homicide.
Oh, shit.
That is massive. So here's what
and you're telling me that they didn't know this 30 years ago, or was this a giant cover-up? All right, did Kurt Cobain have some dirt on Hillary Clinton or some shit? Like, can we... This is crazy. This is insane. Because if you could get a couple of guys on Reddit 30 years later somehow managed to dig this shit up, there's no way the police just was like, yeah, probably oops, a suicide. Not a lot of blood, no fingerprints on the gun. The angles are weird, but whatever. Let's just call it a suicide. You know, like, that's crazy.
They're arguing. They claim the amount of substances in his system would have left him physically incapacitated. We're talking like 20x the OD limit, so that tracks. And according to their argument, someone in that condition would struggle to coordinate movement, let alone operate a firearm.
So you're telling me a guy that was sedated with 20 times the amount of drugs than someone even needed to have an overdose, all right? And they ruled it a suicide by shooting himself in the head? All right, dude.
Wilkins says that Cobain would have been in a near comatose state and barely able to breathe. Secondly, they point to what they describe as oxygen-related organ damage. They argue that certain signs of the autopsy are more consistent with someone who stopped breathing due to substances rather than someone who died instantly from a firearm injury. And then they point to the scene. They describe it eerily clean. They question why his hand, which was found wrapped around the part of the firearm, didn't show any kind of visible blood splatter as they expected.
Yeah, it was staged. Yeah, it was staged. He didn't kill himself. There was no blood splatter on his hand, the hand that was holding the gun, allegedly, that shot himself in the head. And there was no blood splatter on the hand. Yeah, no, all right, dude. Yeah, bro didn't kill himself. And this is a cover-up. This has to be a cover-up, dude. It was a shotgun, too, and it didn't, like, fly out of his hand after he died. Like this is crazy.
Wilkins said, in quote, "There is no universe where that hand is not covered in blood." They also questioned the organization of the substance kit found nearby, saying it looked way too neatly arranged. Their argument is essentially someone under extreme physical duress.
Someone drugged him and shot him in the head and made it look a little bit like a suicide and was probably in cahoots with the police department that said it was a suicide.
Would not carefully cap needles and put equipment away. They then argue the top portion reads like someone expressing frustration about music and fame. Then they claim the final lines appear visually different, larger, more rushed handwriting, and suggest that this could indicate tampering. And I mean, that is interesting because it seems like they're implying he wrote the letter about leaving music behind and someone else added onto it. So not gonna lie here, this looks weird. Looking at this note, I see what they mean. Suddenly, the writing gets really big and it looks a little different. But the team says they asked for the case to be reopened and authorities have responded. So the Seattle Police Department says the death was ruled self-inflicted.
Bro, there's evidence! Why wouldn't we reopen this case?
And that remains their
Unless they want it closed on purpose.
position. So the King County Medical Examiner's Office said they are open to reviewing new evidence, but they've seen nothing that would warrant reopening the case. So now we have two positions. The findings here are reanalysis of existing stuff that have been reviewed before. Sadly, without a new piece of evidence, they might not just be able to get the case reopened. The other side is the Seattle Police Department has had requests for this case to be reopened since the conclusion of it 30 years ago. The conspiracy side of the story has been around for almost as long as the official ruling, but a team of experts publishing a peer-reviewed analysis is still a lot more solid than 3 decades of conspiracy theories. But a lot of the stuff in the new report matches with a whole bunch of the theories that I mentioned earlier, like the public access host who said the police reports just didn't line up. He claimed there wasn't enough visible blood for what had happened, which is pretty similar to what the recent analysis said. Then you have Tom Grant, a private investigator who had been officially hired by Courtney Love during the chaos before Cobain's passing. And afterward, he publicly said that he believed the crime scene was staged. And his arguments focused on a few big things that are, once again, also in the official report. He questioned whether someone with that level of substances in their system could physically coordinate pulling a trigger. And he also questioned the lack of clear fingerprints on certain items. Tom Grant was also the guy who pointed to the things like tour money and industry contracts as financial motives. Then there's the documentaries. Nick Broomfield's film, Kurt and Courtney explored the murder theory in the late 90s. That film mentions one of the most popular theories, that Courtney Love orchestrated everything. And I mean, it could make sense that people thought that she had something to do with it. Because
I mean, look, I'm not gonna point fingers at who possibly did it. I have no idea who did it. All right, no clue. But this looks like some Hollywood shit. Right? It looks like bro knew too much about too many things, and for whatever reason, they had enough pull with the police department to rule it a suicide. Because this new evidence seems like it was all there, and it was, in my opinion, it seems like it was maliciously overlooked.
Especially during this time, they were always in the news for their music, but also their relationship issues.
Reports of frequent heated arguments surfaced, some escalating to physical altercations. On March 18th, police were called to their home in Seattle after an explosive fight. Cobain had locked himself in a room with a gun, threatening to take his own life. Officers managed to de-escalate the situation and seized several firearms from the house.
Even their daughter, Frances, once said, "I always knew their relationship was toxic. I don't promote having a fix-it baby," which is what I was, to fix their problems. That is so sad for a kid to say. But there are a lot of theories as to why she would. Some people think that, she was the handler. Others point to the fact that she gained his estate after he passed. But it is also very important to mention that Courtney Love did sign over the estate to Kurt's daughter, Frances, in 2012. But as of February 2026, his passing remains officially classified as self-inflicted. So
Heartbreaking.
whether this new report changes anything in the future, we don't know. And look,
Yeah, it probably won't. Look, if they were able to bury it, 30 years ago, we are not getting any form of conclusion now. All right, it's probably some either Jewish or Italian old ass mafia guy that got in touch with some fuckers in the police station and was like, listen, put it under the rug. I'll get your daughter into law school if you help me cover up this murder.
did Kurt Cobain openly have issues with depression and substances? Absolutely, yes. But I don't think that means that we should just ignore details that look very weird. And again, in this video, we are absolutely not accusing anyone of anything. We are just looking at the public details. But regardless, someone who's thinking about taking their own life can still be hurt by someone else. Those two things don't cancel each other out. But unfortunately, no one really knows what happened to him. Not 100%. But
it was the Diddy that was before Diddy. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the police department is going to look into it any further.
Of course not, because they probably covered it up the first time.
At least for now. And honestly, that's kind of just a painful ending that some people still struggle to accept. And that's maybe why we're still talking about it. But regardless, I'll keep you guys updated if the Seattle Police Department opens this case back up. But in the meantime, I'll see you guys in the next video.
That is crazy. Unbelievable. Yeah, no, this seems like there's just an overwhelming amount of evidence that he didn't kill himself, and they still don't want to even talk about it. Look, I think Hollywood and, like, these rich fucks have been doing this shit forever. Forever. Like, dude, really? Really? He's on 20 times the amount of pills that's normal for an overdose. He still managed to shoot himself in the head with a shotgun, which had no blood splatter on his hand and no fingerprints on the gun. Like, are we serious? Like, even, you can't even feasibly think about this for more than a second and know that it's not a giant cover-up. Yeah, anyway, that was a crazy lore dive. All right, we'll see you in the next one. Every day, Nux Taku, new lore, subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Like, subscribe, and this video was streamed live on kick.com/Nuxanor. See you there. Stay weird, fam.